nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, and then shall the end come.
Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?
Well, welcome everybody to Tuesday's edition of End of the Age. I'm Dave Robbins, and I thank you for joining me today. And I'm going to be talking to you today about further moves towards the global government, the world government that's prophesied in Revelation chapter 13, that will be established on the earth just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ and will eventually be ruled by the world government. There are major moves going on right now in many areas to establish that world governing body. In many ways, it's already established. And we're watching the culmination of it. It started years ago. And we're watching the culmination of that right now. But before I get into that, I have a very important announcement. And I want to announce to you that this coming Thursday night, starting at 7 o'clock Central Time, I'm going to be taking you through our new series that we put out, From Here to Armageddon. It's an awesome lesson, and it takes you through the events that will take place between now and the second coming of Jesus Christ in the Battle of Armageddon. And if you're watching us we're actually live on Facebook right now, at 7 o'clock Central Time on this coming Thursday, starting December 1st, I'll be streaming live my Bible study that happens here at the End Time Television Studio. I'll be streaming that live on our End Time Facebook page. And if you're in the Dallas area and would like to come to the television studio, you can come to the class. There's no charge. And you can join us in the class here at this television studio. So you would come in the east entrance up front. And so it's always a good time. We've been doing these Bible studies for years. I'm taking people through all of our lessons, and I'm going to take them through From Here to Armageddon. And I've got a lot of people already signed up for it. If you're here in the Dallas area and you'd like to attend, just RSVP to drobbins@endtime.com. That way we'll get a little bit of a count. I've got a lot of people that are already going to come, but have signed up to come. But if you'd like to join us, it's 2701 East George Bush Turnpike. It's at the corner of George Bush and Jupiter, if you're familiar with Dallas, the north end of it. And we're also, like I said, everybody watching, if you want to watch, go to our End Time Ministries Facebook page, join our page, and you can watch live this coming up this Thursday at 7 o'clock Central Standard Time. And it'd be an awesome time. We're going to go through the whole series. It'll take us 8 weeks. And then I'm going to take you through the salvation package, another 4 weeks. And man, it's awesome. And we've got all updated proofs. It's brand new. We just got it here, just over a month ago. We just got them in. And so it's such an awesome lesson. So we'll take you through all of that. This is actually the lesson that Irvin and myself are teaching in our prophecy conferences. When we travel around doing conferences, this is the lesson that we're teaching, and it's awesome. It's the From Here to Armageddon, the events, and then it's showing us how God designed these events to help facilitate one last great end-time revival. So you won't want to miss it. Join us on Facebook. I'm going to take everybody through it live. My Bible study will be live on Facebook, on our End Time Facebook page. Or if you're in the Dallas area, you can come to the television studio, come in the east entrance up front, and we'll start at 7 o'clock sharp. So, because I've got a lot of people joining us, and it should be a really good time. So, today's program is going to be about world government. And it's very important because there are so many moves on right now. They're trying to control everything. They're establishing a world government. It's prophesied. Revelation chapter 13, verses 1 through 8, give a depiction of the world government that's going to be established, and the Antichrist that will rule over that one world government. Well, I want to discuss several ways in the beginning of the program how they're trying to govern everything. And then we're going to get into climate change and what it's all about, what's going on. How are they using climate change to help establish a socialistic one world government? And you need to know about it because it's affecting all of us. They're trying to implement it here in the United States right now. And you understand that the world government they're establishing right now is the world government that will eventually be ran by the Antichrist just in the next few years. So we need to talk about it because it's one of the ways we prove that we are absolutely living in the end time. I have 2 Bible studies going on during the week. One on Monday nights at my home, one on Thursday nights here at the End Time Television Studios. And I was talking to somebody on my Monday night Bible study, and we were talking about, she was saying that, maybe this stuff is 100 years away, or, this stuff could have already happened years ago. And I said, no, that actually is not possible because all of the prophecies that are supposed to have occurred just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ hadn't been fulfilled. We were talking about the rebuilding of the third temple, and that it wasn't possible until 1948 with the rebirth of the nation of Israel. Before then, it wasn't possible. There wasn't even a nation of Israel at that point. So they couldn't have built their third temple, over 60, 70 years ago. It wasn't possible. And then it's not going to be hundreds of years away because everything is culminating right now. The precursors to the mark of the beast, the 6 trumpet wars just ahead of us, Israel's being gathered back together as a nation in 1948. Everything's coming together right now. We're in the end time. There's so many ways to prove that. Well, the ongoing fulfillment of this one world government being established, that's one of the ways we use to prove that. And so I'm going to be going through several different things here in the beginning, and then we'll get off into climate change, and I'll tell you what's going on because the world government is trying to push climate change in order to to redistribute the wealth of the world. That's what it's all about. And as a socialistic principle to the world governing body, the world government's going to be a socialistic entity. But then here comes a President-elect Donald Trump, the next president of the United States, the most powerful nation on earth, and he says climate change is a hoax. So you can understand the conundrum that we're in right now. All of these global leaders are screaming, we're wanting this, we need this climate change scare tactic to get everybody to be able to want to yield up there, to willingly let us redistribute their wealth to underdeveloped nations. And President-elect Trump, the next president of the United States, says, that's all a hoax. We're going to back out of the Paris climate change deal, and we're not going to implement all that here. The global leaders, the people that want a one world government, they don't know what to do with Trump. And so we're going to talk about it because it's ongoing efforts to establish a world government, the same world government prophesied in Revelation chapter 13. So the first article I have, I'm going to go through several of them here real quick, is international ocean governments. They're wanting to govern or to manage the oceans of the world. International global governance. The EU's contribution for safe, secure, clean, and sustainably managed oceans. This comes from the European Commission. Federica Mogherini, High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, the Vice President of the European Commission, said, with this joint communication, we confirm our engagement to be at the front line of the implementation of the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It's a world government. And China's Communist Party, they're talking about the push for the United Nations Sustainable Development, implementing them worldwide, and this is the EU's efforts to implement that to govern all of the oceans and seas of the world. It's world government, every aspect of climate, of finance, of trade, now the oceans. Then next, China's Communist Party leaders, they're calling for a fairer global governance of the internet. So we're talking about the establishment of a world government. All of the major players in the world, they want to govern everything. And so This article states that the Communist Party leadership has repeatedly called for the establishment of cyberspace sovereignty and for development. Imagine China calling for that, sovereignty. And for developing nations to assume a greater role in governing the internet at the global level. So here you're talking about global governance of the oceans, and then China's discussing global governance of the internet. And then the next one is Ishmael Lagardian. He's stating that we're entering the post-global era. He states that indeed governments around the world went out of their way to open their societies to invest and the flow of goods and services, to investment and the flow of goods and services, and thereby ceded aspects of state sovereignty to global institutions. Very briefly, the global whole or the globalized world. Here's what we're talking about globalization. Irvin and myself are always talking about it. The move towards a world government or the globalized world was propped up, as it were, by the institutions of global governance. This is the goal of all of this. Most prominent among these are the United Nations. The United Nations was established from its inception in 1945 to be a socialistic one world governing body. Also, the World Bank. This is how they're managing the world. Global governance. The United Nations, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the Global Trade Regime, which was formalized as the World Trade Organization, or the WTO, way back in 1995. All these things have been established for years, and a lot of people don't even have any clue. What's the World Trade Organization? What's the World Health Organization? It goes on to say that more and more of the institutions, especially the WTO, the World Trade Organization, gained power sufficient to affect the domestic policies of the sovereign states. So it's very important that we understand that these people, these entities, these international institutions have already been instituted. They've been established to govern the world. He said it right here in this article. Global governance, that's the goal. We're talking about global governance of the oceans, global governance of they're discussing global governance of the internet, of the trade policies, of finance, the United Nations. They want to govern every nation on earth. Yield up your sovereignty. That's the goal. And the Bible says just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ, there will be a world government established, and the Antichrist would eventually usurp control over that world governing body and rule the world. That's just in the next few years, folks. It's not very far off. And so we're not looking for the end times to begin. We're in the end time. This is only one proof. There are several proofs. I could go over many of them, but I'm going to spend time on just one today that lets us know absolutely we're in the end time. I get calls all the time that says, "This is crazy. You guys talk about this stuff all the time. We're not in the end time." And they say, "Prove it." And I say, "Well, which prophecy do you want me to talk about?" I can talk about all of them. Pick one that you want me to discuss, and I can prove to you we're in the end time. Because we absolutely are there, everyone. The next article is from Euractiv, and it says, where are forests in Europe's Sustainable Development Goals plans? So the Sustainable Development Goals is implemented by the United Nations. It was bought into and adopted by every nation on earth last September of 2015, to implement these goals. And the goals are to govern every aspect of every human on earth. So Euractiv is saying, where are forests in the Europe's Sustainable Development Goals plans? The article goes on to state, concerning the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, or world government, in the European Union. So this is the European Union's efforts to implement the Sustainable Development Goals. It states, finally, the latest plans stress that the agenda, the Sustainable Development Goals, must be implemented as a whole and not selectively, and implementation must be based on a rules-based global order, world government, with multilateralism as its key principle and the United Nations at its core. Well, the Charter of the United Nations was penned by Alger Hiss, a convicted communist spy who penned the charter for the United Nations to be a socialistic one world governing body. So the EU is saying we've got to implement the Sustainable Development Goals, and as the United Nations, we need their charter at its core. It's going to be totally socialistic, and the Bible tells us that that's going to be the case. And then it states, in an increasingly atomized world, with the UK voting to exit the EU and threats from the United States to withdraw, they're talking about Donald Trump here, from the Paris Agreement on climate change, this represents an explicit assertion. In other words, we need to put our best foot forward of the need for unity and internationalism to fight the supreme challenges of our time. So they're talking about internationalism. They're talking about a one world government. We have to, they're saying with the UK exiting, with Brexit exiting the EU, and with Donald Trump over here, we don't know what the next president of the United States is going to do. We need to put our best effort into play right now to implement these Sustainable Development Goals with the United Nations at the hub of it. They're talking about global governance. So look at the common denominator here, everybody, of all of these things. You have global governance of the oceans. China's proposing global governance of the internet. You have with the international institutions that are established. You have the World Bank, which they're going to govern the finance. You have trade, the World Trade Organization. You got the International Monetary Fund that will help monitor finance. I'm talking about globally. You have the World Health Organization, monitors the health and disease. You have the Global Court, the International Criminal Court. You say, well, what are all these for? They are to govern, eventually what they're trying to do is to get them to govern you and me, every aspect of our life. And now you have what they're trying to push with the Paris Agreement is the global governance of the climate of the earth. They believe that they can actually take on the role of God and manage the climate of the earth. And God has been regulating the climate since He created the earth. But yet now man is saying, we believe we need to govern the climate of the earth. We can do it. You know, God isn't able to, so we need to take control of that. That's what they're saying here. They're pulling God out of our society and saying, man, this government that we're trying to create, we need to control that. That's what the Paris Agreement is all about. That's what they're trying to do. So the common denominator here is the global governance of everything. They're establishing a world governing body. The Paris Agreement, let's talk about it. It's to usher in a new chapter in the global climate governance. It's the next article. Paris Agreement, obviously, is officially entered into force recently, completing its last legal procedure after being concluded, signed, and approved. As a comprehensive, balanced, and ambitious treaty, the pact will bring the world new prospect of sustainable development. There's that world governance effort by the United Nations by setting a new path for multilateral effort on climate change. They think they're going to be able to control the climate. God's not doing a very good job, so this world government they're trying to establish, they think they're going to be able to control the climate. The agreement not only reflects the world's determination to promote low carbon transition and fight against climate change. Folks, the climate has changed every day since the Lord created the earth. And it's going to change every day from here on out. They're going to fight against what God's put into place. Think about that. What they're trying to do is crazy, and it's all based on a lie, and I'm going to show you that here in a minute. But it also serves as a reference and injects confidence for, get this, global governance in many other fields. So they're talking about the Paris climate deal here, and it's pushing the Sustainable Development Goals, and they're going to try to manage the climate of the earth in an effort to create a global government. They want to scare everybody. If we don't control the climate, the earth's going to burn up, go away. We're not going to have any future for our children. And what's the solution? A socialistic one world government that can come in and control everything for us, because there is no, according to them, there is no God. He's not doing a very good job controlling the climate. So we need to take matters into our own hands. That's the ruse that's being given. So what's the common denominator here? If you look at all of this, it's a world government. The very world government prophesied to be in power just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ and the Battle of Armageddon. So let's talk about the global efforts to establish a socialistic world government using the hoax. And again, let's say capital H-O-A-X. It's a hoax. Global warming, which leads to climate change. It's a hoax. It's an absolute hoax. I can't say that enough. You're being fed on the news by Barack Obama, John Kerry, Hillary Clinton, anybody who talks from the United Nations, Secretary Ban Ki-moon, all of these Hollywood movie stars, Leonardo DiCaprio, George Clooney, all of these people. They're talking about they're given scare tactics because they bought into this world government. The world governing, the globalists, are using these people because they are popular among some people. And they're using them as a voice to push the ruse or the hoax or the lie of global warming leads to climate change. It's a total lie. But yet, they've got an ulterior motive. They've got an agenda, and that's to push a world government. So they've got all these people, these world leaders, to push this hoax. And that's why they really flip out when somebody like Donald Trump comes along, the next president of the United States, and says, oh, that's a hoax. He's flying right in the face of the international community and the world government that they're trying to establish. So let's talk about driving humanity into a world government. Of course, after World War II, the United Nations was founded as an international organization to maintain peace and safety by developing friendly relationships, this is another ruse, between nations and promoting social progress. The idea behind this institution sounded great until it was discovered that the charter establishing the United Nations was drafted by a convicted communist spy, Alger Hiss, with a communistic or socialistic agenda driving the mechanics of the organization. It's easy to see how the global elites have been able to work from within the United Nations to quietly build a world government. It's exactly their goal. A socialistic world government is the goal, and promoting belief in global warming is the number one vehicle to reach that goal. They've got to scare somebody. They've got to have a crisis, get everybody in fear mode so they'll yield up their sovereignties to this world governing body. It's what the goal of the whole thing's all about. And so one of the core belief systems of socialism is that most conflict in society stems from an ever-broadening gap between the wealthy and the poor. The contention is that the wealthy are the ruling class and will inevitably use their economic power to enforce their will upon the less fortunate. Even though the wealthy in this country, they're demonized, but yet you understand the wealthy are the ones that own the factories that give everybody jobs. The wealthy are the ones that own the businesses, the restaurants and the production plants and all these different places and all the small businesses. They're the ones that provide the jobs. But yet they're demonized in a socialistic society. So if they believe that in a socialism believes that the wealthy will inevitably use their economic power to enforce their will on the less fortunate, which is absolutely not the case. There have probably been cases of that, but yet as a whole, United States has become the greatest nation on earth because people help people. Let's face it, there are a lot of good business owners out there. There are a lot of people that have money that really help people. They're taking it to extremes. The ultimate socialistic solution to this problem is to abolish private property ownership, for the state to own all principal means of production, with the central government reestablishing redistributing wealth evenly among the masses. So you got this central governing authority that believes they know how to redistribute wealth. If this person has more than the others, we need to redistribute this and even out the playing field in this society. And that's what a carbon tax does. It takes money from the wealthy developed nations and it funnels it down to the poor, underdeveloped nations. That's a socialistic principle, wealth redistribution. The result would be a classless, communistic or socialistic society where a global government would ensure equality for all citizens. That's the whole goal behind the United Nations. The world government that's being established on earth right now. The United Nations. Think about that. A lot of people think the United Nations is this great humanitarian organization. It was written, the original charter was written by a convicted communist spy, and not one word of that charter has ever changed. So the United Nations, from its inception, was designed to be a communistic or a socialistic one world governing body. Not one word of that charter has ever changed. So if you understand what's going on, the common denominator in all of this, and we're going to get into the climate change here in a minute, after the break, is a world government. We're talking about a world government. The Bible says a world government's going to be established just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. We're seeing it happening right now. So for the next 30 minutes though, join me at endtime.com for the rest of my program.
From Here to Armageddon, a new exciting 8-lesson series to share with your friends and family. Order yours right away.
Answering many questions like, how far are we from the Battle of Armageddon? What will happen between now and then? Where are we on the timeline? Your questions answered in this exciting 8-lesson series, From Here to Armageddon.
Go to endtime.com or call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-END-TIME, 1-800-363-8463. Order yours right away.
If ever people need to hear the unvarnished truth, it is now. There are some subjects that are not politically correct to talk about, but they're urgent. That's why I'm grateful for End Time magazine. If you're not a subscriber, you're missing information that will really impact your life. End Time has a bi-monthly magazine that explains how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. You can get a 2-year subscription for only $29. You can also get a bulk subscription and pass them out to your church. We have gotten reports that End Time magazine has caused spiritual awakenings in churches when they see the prophecies being fulfilled right now. You can start your own ministry and leave them in doctors' offices, libraries, laundromats. You never know if you might be responsible for saving someone who is searching for the unvarnished truth. That's what the magazine did in my life. Call 1-800-363-8463. That's 1-800-END-TIME and get your subscription today.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the archives button.
So we're talking about the establishment of a one world governing body. And if you follow the news at all, you can see what I'm talking about. A lot of people, you can tell that the climate change, the global warming which leads to climate change, it's a hoax. They've actually almost quit using the term global warming because the earth quit warming. And so they quit using the global warming term because it was so easy to disprove. They started using the term climate change because then they could blame every tornado, hurricane, earthquake, everything on, there's another incident that happened because of climate change. the fact of the matter is that global warming, the earth warming up and the atmosphere warming up, and which leads to the climate changing and all these drastic weather events, it's simply a hoax. Listen, folks, let me take the fear out of it. God is in control of the climate. He always has been, He always will be. And the fact that these people are trying to control, they're trying to establish a world government and think, well, we can control the climate. God is totally against this world government that they're trying to establish. It's very simple. The Bible says that this, when it's describing in Revelation 13, 1 through 8, this world governing body, the Bible says that the dragon, which is Satan, Revelation 12:9 tells us that, the dragon there gives the Antichrist, this one world governing body, its seat, its power, and its great authority. Satan is behind this world governing body. He's trying to establish this. It's his effort to rule the world. He doesn't believe that God will ever come back and rule the world. It's Satan's effort to rule the world and to get everybody to pay obeisance to him. So he's behind this world government. God is totally against this world government. So, the Bible says it's going to happen. The Antichrist is eventually going to take control. The Lord's going to come back and He's going to tear down human government and set up His government or His kingdom here on earth for 1,000 years. It's a 1,000-year millennial reign. He's going to destroy this world governing body. But it's being established right now and Satan is behind it. So that's why we need to talk about it. And it's being established in many ways. It's already established. But what they're trying to do right now, they really don't have the teeth or the enforcement methods that they want, but they're slowly growing those teeth. That's the problem here. Their tentacles go all throughout the earth, even in the United States. So when somebody like Donald Trump says, well, I'm going to pull us out of that Paris Agreement on climate change, man, they start screaming and doing cartwheels and everything else because he is standing in the face of their move towards this one world governing body. And so, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. So, they're trying to realize a socialistic world government, but it would be impossible to fully realize the dream of a communistic one world government without the redistribution of wealth from the developed nations to the poor, underdeveloped nations of the world. That's the goal. One of the goals is wealth redistribution. It's a socialistic principle. This is the main goal of the global warming and the climate change hoax. The lie that they're spinning is to put taxes on CO2 emissions in the developed nations and funnel that money to underdeveloped nations. It's wealth redistribution. Even though it doesn't solve the plan, solve the so-called issue, which there's no issue at all, but it doesn't even solve that. The whole goal is to redistribute the wealth, to feed the people of the world a lie, to redistribute the wealth. The United Nations elites know that a perpetual global life-threatening crisis is necessary to fear tactics to convince the wealthy nations to accept the punitive cost of a cap-and-trade tax. Most of you will recognize the term cap-and-trade tax. It's simply a wealth redistribution scheme. Wealth redistribution is exactly what carbon tax laws are designed to accomplish. The government sets a cap on the amount of carbon emissions that an industrialized nation can emit. If the limit is exceeded, then carbon credits can be purchased from underdeveloped nations who have more credits than they need. But it doesn't solve a problem. See what I'm saying? And the fact of the matter is, it's easy to prove that CO2 emissions have nothing to do with global warming. Global warming, the fear-mongering, it's simply a scheme. It's a lie. It's propaganda put together by the global elites to redistribute the wealth of the world and to move us into world government, global governance. It's what it's all designed to do. Global warming is only one of the messages being used to force the nations of the world into this world government they're trying to create. Anytime you hear terms like global governance, propaganda like Agenda 21, sustainable development, nationalized health care, Obamacare, nationalized health care, social justice, and national identification programs, it's all stems from world government, all of those. A nationalized healthcare system comes from an effort to promote a world governing system. But it is the global warming, I should say climate change. I guess global warming, they don't want to say in that. That's not politically correct. So let me say global warming that leads to climate change. That's presently the poster child being used to frighten everyone into giving up freedom for saving the planet. And it's kind of neat because former governor of the state of Washington, Dixie Lee Ray, she probably summed it up best when she said, "The objective clearly enunciated by the leaders of the UNCED, or the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, the goal is to bring about a change in the present system of independent nations," which the United States is one of those. We signed a Declaration of Independence 240 years ago. So they're trying to bring about a change in that present system, and the future is to be a world government. She stated it right out there. There's not even trying to hide it. The future is to be a world government with central planning by the United Nations. By the United Nations? Well, hold on a minute. The United Nations was created to be a socialistic, one world governing body. That's exactly right. And the former governor of Washington knew that. And she goes on to state that fear of the environmental crisis, global warming, which leads to climate change, she states, whether real or not, doesn't matter to her, it's expected to lead to compliance to this one world governing body and all of its edicts. That's the entire goal here of the global warming, which leads to climate change hoax, is to get everybody to comply. Compliance to a communistic or a socialistic world governing body is the goal, and the global warming climate change deception is the life-threatening crisis that the United Nations has chosen to get there. Anytime you hear global warming, climate change, during the election, when Hillary Clinton, you had Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton was all for this. The Clintons are internationalists, liberal internationalists. They believe in this one world governing body. They were pushing it. Then Donald Trump comes along and says, it's a hoax. You see that they were diametrically opposed. And the internationalists, people believe in a world government, they were flipping out. And so they were diametrically opposed on that issue. And so consequently, Donald Trump, the next president of the United States, sees it as a hoax. And I hope he stands his ground on that fact, because it is a lie. It's a lie spun by people who want to set up and establish a world governing body. So let's talk about global warming for a second. Global warming, which leads to climate change. It's very important. It seems that for decades, global elitists, those that believe in a world governing body, have been spinning tales of an impending ice age or a catastrophic global warming. That all they need is the scare tactic. It doesn't matter what the crisis is. They're spinning this ruse of an ice age or this coming ice age or the catastrophic global warming in an effort to keep the masses in a perpetual state of fear. That's the goal. But now that global cooling and global warming have been so easily disproven, the earth is always cooling up and heating down. It happens like that. It's a cycle. Politicians and their on-staff scientists have resorted to promoting fear of man-made climate change, and now they can blame that they've moved to climate change. Global warming was easily disproven. Now they can blame every hurricane, earthquake, drought, flood, snowstorm. They were saying when we had a couple years ago, we had these huge snowstorms and it was like 5 degrees below zero, that global warming actually caused that. It's crazy. But there are a lot of people who have bought into that and say, well, it's climate change. It's a hoax. The climate is going to change. That God created it that way. There's going to be seasons. There's going to be a spring, a summer when it's hot. There's going to be a fall, and there's going to be a winter when it's cold. God created that. The Bible says that those seasons will remain as long as the earth is here. That's going to happen. You know why? Because God is in control. None of these globalists, these people who believe in a world government, none of them are in control. God's in control. They're not going to control the climate. That's laughable. It's a hoax because they're trying to establish the world government prophesied in Revelation chapter 13. So what we really need to do is wake up. God has been regulating the temperature of this planet for thousands of years now. The very idea that a government entity can control the weather or the temperature of the planet by regulating the amount of CO2 that we emit into the atmosphere, that's preposterous. But that's precisely the message that globalists or internationalists at the United Nations continue to spread. But not only world leaders like Barack Obama and different world leaders like that, but also Hillary Clinton, Bill Gates, Leonardo DiCaprio just put out a whole movie on it that showed on the National Geographic Channel. They've tapped George Clooney, the director James Cameron, Cameron Diaz, many others. They've got these Hollywood stars and all these different people pushing this lie, this propaganda, to keep everybody in fear mode so they can set up their world governing body. It's a complete hoax. The goal is a world government, the world government, prophesied in Revelation chapter 13. The problem with world leaders and other well-known individuals spreading the message that man-made global warming is heating up the, heating up the planet is that it's a total lie. It's an absolute hoax. And it's very important that we understand that these people, what's the goal here? The goal is a global government. And the Bible prophesies, Revelation chapter 13, that the establishment of this world government is going to happen just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ and the Battle of Armageddon. So we need to know about that because we're in the end time. We're not looking for the end time to occur. We're in the end time right now. And it's very important that we know that. This is one of the ways we use the establishment of this world governing body. It's one of the ways we use to prove that we absolutely are in the end time as we speak.
Most people have dreamed of someday walking on the ground where Jesus walked over 2,000 years ago. You don't want to wait any longer. Make this the year for your life-changing experience. Judy and I would like to invite you to join us for our 2017 Spring End Time Prophecy Tour. This is a 14-day trip to Israel and Rome. Please join us to experience the greatest place on earth, the Promised Land, with an added bonus, Rome, Italy. Start making your plans right now and join us April 30th through May 13th of 2017. We're going to have a wonderful time.
Call now to reserve your place today at 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 or go to endtime.com.
You see the problem with this, with this, the establishment of this world governing body, and with world leaders and other well-known individuals spreading the message that man-made global warming is heating up the planet, which in turn causes all sorts of climate change catastrophes. It's that none of it's true. It's all based on a lie. That's right, everyone. It's a lie. It's a scam. It's a hoax. Science has already debunked the man-made global warming scam, and yet those that are pushing the establishment of a world government emphatically claim that it's true. I think they've said it so many times they're actually starting to believe it, even though they know it's a lie. That's why those that want to use the scare tactics of a global warming, climate change, they get very frustrated when somebody like Donald Trump, the next president of the United States, he makes statements like Obama's talking about all of this with the global warming and stuff like that, and a lot of it's a hoax. It's a hoax. I mean, it's a money-making industry, okay? It's a hoax, a lot of it. Now, we're talking about the next president of the United States. January 20th, he'll be in office. And he's saying climate change is a hoax. It's right in the face of all of these internationalists that are pushing this one world governing body. And let me tell you, without the United States involved, the system breaks down. They're going to have to start setting up something else. What happens if Trump pulls us out of this United Nations body and the move towards a one world governing body? What's going to happen? Powers will probably have to swing over to Europe. And that's actually what the Bible says is going to happen. So the next several years is going to be really interesting to watch here. But Trump also said in one of his energy policy speeches, I think it was in North Dakota back in May of this year, he stated, "I'm going to rescind all of the job-destroying Obama executive actions, including the Climate Action Plan. We're going to cancel the Paris Climate Agreement and stop all the payment of U.S. tax dollars to the UN global warming programs." If he does that, I'll do a cartwheels down the front of our building out here, because he's standing straight in the face of the international community and saying, this is a lie. We're pulling out of that, and we're going to make America great again. So it's going to be real interesting to see what happens. He also said that there has been a big push, this is Trump, to develop alternative forms of energy, so-called green energy from renewable sources. Well, that's a big mistake, he says. To begin with, the whole push for renewable energy is being driven by the wrong motivation. The mistaken belief that global climate change is being caused by carbon emissions. If you don't buy that, and I don't, states Trump, then what we have is really just an expensive way making tree huggers feel good about themselves. And honestly, that's all it is alternative forms of energy because of looking for that and because of global warming, climate change. So what are the realities? Is global warming man-made? It's a question we need to ask. And if not, why are these politicians and world leaders, scientists, global dreamers continuing to lie about it? Well, like I've stated before, it's all about the establishment of a world government. That's the reason for the lie. Scare everyone into accepting more governance and the redistribution of wealth from the developed nations to the underdeveloped nations. Is global warming man-made? That's the question. Because you say, well, how can you prove it's a lie? The entire global warming climate change theory hinges on the premise that humans, through the emissions of greenhouse gases, mainly CO2, are causing the temperature of the earth to rise, and as a result, the climate changes, which leads to all sorts of weather catastrophes such as snowstorms, droughts, tornadoes, hurricanes, tsunamis, all that stuff. You've all heard it in the news. Every time there's something like that happens, well, there's climate change. It's all a lie. There's no truth to it at all. The climate is going to change. God designed it to change. The global warming alarmists contend that the more CO2 humans emit into the atmosphere, the more the planet heats up. And they frantically warn that if this is not stopped, we will destroy the planet. So, is any of this really happening? Well, the answer is no. None of it is true. As a matter of fact, most scientists do not agree with the man-made global warming theory. And they have offered sound scientific data debunking the myth totally. So here are just a few of the many proofs. There's hundreds of proofs, but I want to give you just a few of the many proofs that have been provided. There are books and books and books on this, folks. It's everywhere. It's easily proven that global warming does not, with the CO2, the emission of CO2 that causes the earth to heat up. Let's look at temperature increases. Let me give you proof number one. Temperature increases and CO2. The temperatures increase, a rise in CO2, not vice versa. A lot of these people who are pushing this lie, they say that CO2 emitted into the air causes the temperatures to increase. It's actually reversed. Temperatures increase over time, and then CO2 follows that. So let's think about it. In his now famous global warming documentary, a lot of you have seen it, An Inconvenient Truth, by former Vice President Al Gore, he produced a graph depicting the variations, and this is very important because a lot of people bought into this. He produced a graph depicting the variations of temperature and the levels of CO2 and in the atmosphere over the last, according to him, 650,000 years. And this was according to computer-generated models, which are skeptical at best if you've read the news at all. Well, in the graph, in this movie, An Inconvenient Truth, in one of his graphs, Al Gore strategically separated the two lines, and he placed the temperature line below the CO2 line. And he obviously done it in an attempt to create the delusion that when the amount of CO2 emissions increased, the temperature automatically began to climb as well. And it was a complete, he was trying to fool everybody is what he was doing. Well, his obvious conclusion was that the global warming was being generated by mankind's modern industrial development, which had increased the amount of CO2 emissions in the atmosphere, and as a solution, which caused, obviously, he said, the earth to warm. Well, as a solution, Mr. Gore advocated this is his solution, okay? Now just listen at this. He advocated global laws that would revolutionize our lifestyles and to redistribute the wealth of the world through his proposed cap and trade legislation and establish a system of global governance that would end national sovereignty. Now that was his solution to this graph that he gave and in his movie. And the graph he gave was actually wrong. Why? Because experts analyzed the graph by placing the CO2, they actually did it right. They placed the CO2 line directly over the temperature line to where they all lined up rather than having them, the CO2 line above the temperature line. They lined them up and they proved conclusively that CO2 levels had risen only as a result of the increase in temperature first. So the temperature went up first, and then CO2, over time, CO2 would rise to not necessarily catch it, but it would rise. And it's not the other way around like Mr. Gore was trying to prove. So a closer look at the graph revealed that now get this, that over time, that the temperature and CO2 levels, the changing was at times as much as 800 years apart. So the temperature would rise for some reason. The earth was heating, cooling, all throughout time. There were ice ages, there were many ice ages, there were times of great heat. It was heating up and cooling down. You can look at the chart. And over time, if you'd follow the temperature and the CO2, there were times when the temperature would rise and the CO2 level, which they took these from ice core samples and things, they can tell all this stuff. The temperature would rise, and in some cases, almost 800 years later, it was 800 years before the CO2 would begin to rise. So it was totally disproven. It was one proof. Obviously, this one proof alone has destroyed the entire basis for the global warming theory. They're saying because we emit so much CO2 that the temperature increases. But an increased amount of CO2 does not result in global warming. Actually, the opposite of is true. Temperatures rise and then CO2 rises after several years to follow that. And so with that one proof alone, it's easy to prove that It's simply not the case. He tried to manipulate our mind in his movie, An Inconvenient Truth, and people went back and analyzed it, and it was a complete fallacy. Another proof is that CO2 has risen at a record rate for over a decade, but the global temperatures have remained the same. According to an article by James Taylor in Forbes magazine, the U.S. Department of Energy revealed in its estimates of global carbon dioxide emissions for the year back in the 2010 that since 2001, carbon emissions had increased 33% globally, yet the Earth's temperatures had pretty much flatlined. They remained the same for over a decade. He went on to state that the fact that global warming temperatures are not rising despite such a significant increase in carbon dioxide emissions provides validation of skeptical arguments, not a cause for heightened alarm. CO2 emissions do not cause temperatures to rise. Now, I will tell you, I've got a lot of proofs that I'll never get to. I've got 2 minutes left. Email me, drobbins@endtime.com, and I'll give you a lot of easy to understand proofs that global warming, that the increase, humans emitting CO2, global warming, causes the earth to warm, which leads to climate change. That's a hoax. It's a lie. It's propaganda. So that way they can establish a world governing body and redistribute the wealth throughout the world. Remember Al Gore's goal, his stated goal. It's a hoax. And so that's why one of the reasons that we're watching what Donald Trump will do. All during his campaign, he said it's a hoax. I don't believe in it. It's a hoax. And so it appears that recently he may have softened a little bit. I don't know. We'll have to see what he does. I'm really not looking at what he says. I'm looking at really what he does. So in the end, what's this tell us? There's the establishment of a world governing body. They're trying to govern the oceans, and they're talking about governing the China is proposing international governance of the internet and governance of the finance and of trade and of the court system, International Criminal Court. They want the Sustainable Development Goals. They want to govern every aspect of your life, right down to the nth degree. What you produce and what you consume, electricity, food, everything. They're trying to establish, and in many ways it's already established, a world government. It's the same world government prophesied in Revelation 13 to be in power at the second coming of Jesus Christ. And it's the world government that the Antichrist will usurp authority over in just the near future. Folks, we're not looking for the end time to begin. We're in the end time right now.
End of the Age is a production of End Time Ministries. This broadcast will be available on our website, endtime.com, in the archives section. On our website, you'll also find more information about how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. To reach our operators, call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. End Time Ministries is partner supported. We would like to say thank you to our partners who made this broadcast possible. To do what Matthew 24:14 said, to reach the world with the gospel of the kingdom.